Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris PT, and welcome to Africa Digital Leadership. We had a bit of technical difficulties, but we are all back. Some of our panelists are trying to connect still, but we're going to start and hoping that they're going to actually join a little bit later. So if you are connected through Facebook, or so you can connect through Facebook or YouTube. If you see us, it means that you're on one of these platforms, but we're going to share the links anyway, of these, of the broadcast links on all the platforms. So thank you very much to our panelists for being patient and for availing yourselves for today's session. And last week we had a very interesting session. And so this week we're doing a continuation of that event, but there were some questions that were left unanswered last week, and we had to just revisit them. And then we have a lot more questions that we want to ask. And then we would like to involve you, the audience, as well, and get a lot more feedback from you and some questions that you would like those panelists to answer. So because we've wasted a bit of time, we are going to go right at it. We're going to start right immediately. So the first question that we'd like to ask is basically, it's going to go to Joy Kendi. And the question really is, how long should a client own the rights to your content, or your posts after you've gotten into a campaign and you've gotten into some sort of agreement and some sort of a contract?
Generally, they're not supposed to own the rights to your content unless they pay extra for owning your content. And that is basically just determined by you. So if they do pay for rights to your content, then it can be anywhere between 6 months, a year. It's up to you as a content creator to decide that. But when you do content for a brand, like let's say I'm doing a campaign for Mac and I post those pictures up on Instagram, they don't own those photos at all. The photos are still owned by me.
All right. Sarah, you representing a brand. So what do you have to say about that? I mean, when you engage an influencer, what do you think? Do you think they actually have so what do you own and for how long? What are your views on this?
Well, it depends on the contract that you have in place, and certainly it depends on the nature of your engagement. So in a case where it's a content creator like Joy creating content, she's right, it sits with her. She owns it. She owns her audience, so she owns that content. And as a brand, I can link to it. The problem comes in when, not the problem. The issue becomes, it becomes an issue when I maybe decide to do a photo shoot for perhaps commercials with her or with any brand influencer, or like maybe do print spreads or outdoor. Then the issue of who owns the content, who owns the IP, who pays for it, becomes an issue. And so obviously that's agreed between the brand and the content creator, the talent. And so the brand needs to decide how much the exposure it wants to give itself.
All right, thank you very much for this. Would like to ask you another question. And Joy, it's going to look like we're actually focusing on you in the beginning, but so as an influencer, do you think it's a good idea to stick to your niche, or do you think there's value in exploring many different avenues?
I think there's a lot of value with expanding as much as possible. I think the biggest issue that I've noticed, especially with females, they kind of go towards fashion and they kind of just stick to that. And in Kenya, fashion honestly doesn't pay. For example, for me, my money comes in more from tech, makeup, beauty, food, drinks, banks. So I don't really, you need to be able to expand the type of content that you do as much as possible.
All right, thank you very much, Joy, for this. I'd like to bring in Mr. Kemibaro. What do you think? Do you think it's better for an influencer to stick to their niche or a content creator? I mean, you are a content creator, so as well. So what do you think? Do you think there's value in expanding your horizons and looking at other things, or is it better to actually stick to one thing?
Thank you very much, Chris. I think I used to be of the opinion that you want to stay in your lane, right? So you stay in, say, your tech blogging or your tech content because that's what you know best.
Yeah.
But increasingly, you find that I think individuals and influencers or content creators are multidimensional, and you have other interests and you have other stuff that catches your attention. So, I think when you diversify your content, you also give your audience something different to look at. And also at the same time, people have vastly different interest areas, so to just stay in one area is kind of limiting yourself. So I would recommend influencers to always venture into other areas where they have a passion, maybe they have some authority in that space as well in terms of understanding it well, but there is no harm in going beyond your core. And I think increasingly you're seeing influencers sort of going into new areas, whether it's because the market's pushing them there or they're just really exposing other interests that they have.
All right. Thank you very much for this. We'd like to move on to something that we've been discussing behind the scenes with all these panelists as well. The question really is a question of brand story. So does a brand really, is a brand losing anything for not paying for exclusivity? Let me explain the context. So let's say, for example, you have an influencer that is well known, but that spends, that publishes about 16 to 15 brands a day, for example. So do you guys think it makes sense? It's a model that really makes sense? Or do you think it would be better to minimize for maximum impact? We know that attention span is something really difficult to maintain today. So what do you guys, panelists, what do you guys really think about that? Do you think it's better for influencers to focus enough 2 or 3 brand engagement, on their platforms a day, or do you think it does not matter? They could have as many as they would like to. And I'd like to bring Sarah. Will you go on this one?
Sure. I think it's both and. I think from the influencer side, let's be very practical. Unless you are, the mega footballer who can charge millions of dollars, for our micro, even our big tier 1 influencers in market, it's impractical to gain only one brand engagement. I think the key is for influencers to engage brands that actually resonate with their follower base. So even if they're presenting multiple offerings, then it makes sense. And I'll just add a little bit from a psychological perspective. We have something called a reticular activating system in your mind, which basically says you look for the content that you need at the time, or you look for information on what you need at the time. So if a brand, if an influencer has wide reach, then it's okay for them to do multiple people, because if their reach is wide, then the people who need to see it will see it. If they have a smaller niche, then yeah, maybe they want to fine tune the brands they actually talk about.
All right. I would like to hear from Kamarichi.
Yeah.
Kamarichi, what are your views on this?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
What are your views on the last question that we asked? So basically, it's, do you believe that it's better for an influencer to actually have as many posts as they want, engage with as many brands as they want per day? You know how it could be, I've seen a lot of influencers that post about 15 different brands. So for you, do you think there's value in minimizing the number of posts that they have so that they're a little bit more believable, or do you think it doesn't really matter? I'm talking about on a particular day.
Well, I think the influencers creative has a big role to play in this. So, they can always engage. They could do a huge number of brands. Our advice to influencers is always to be very creative about how you plug in your brand. They should be very natural, very authentic, because there's the reason why your audience has chosen to follow you. So you might have 3 different products that you're pushing, but given how you're going around it, becomes very authentic, very believable. If you're a travel influencer, then your travel partner is somebody who could be paying you, and you can easily plug that in. People know you're a content creator, so they could be asking you, how are you able to communicate on the move? So if you're working with a brand like Safaricom, then this is a chance to plug in Safaricom, how strong their network is. It's just about how they go around it, but best practice has always been to to give your audience quality content, the best practice has always been to minimize the number of brands you can work with at a given time for a piece of content.
All right, thank you very much, Kamarichi. I'd like to hear from Caroline Kendi. Safaricom works with a lot of influencers, and has a lot of engagement. So what do you think? Do you think you would get value if you were to engage an influencer and you were one of many brands? Let's say in a day you have 20 brands that are featured. So what are your views on this?
I think the essence of influencer marketing is in the authenticity and credibility of the influencer. So, at the risk of repeating what the rest of the guys have said, it's not really about numbers per se, because ultimately, as an influencer, because I like to see the influencer also needs to see themselves as a brand, right? And if they look at themselves as a brand, then how they engage, who they engage with, how credible they keep their brand and authentic they keep their brand is what will keep them in the game in the long term. So I would say, you can use different brands, but they have to be aligned and be clear with authentically what you represent as an influencer. So that at the end of the day, as long as it's about the influencer, then Safaricom or whichever other brands are sharing the space will not feel like there's any conflicting interest, because it's just it's authentically presented with the influencer in mind, but also with a relevant audience. So I think for me that would be my view on that.
All right, thank you for that. I'd like to shift gears a bit and talk about now that we have, we've added 2 new panelists, of which Kamarichi, who runs an influencer marketing agency and management agency. So Kamarichi, we're going to put you a little bit on the spot right now. Do you think, what is the role of an influencer marketing agency, first of all? And what are the advantages really that an influencer has to subscribe to an agency? The reason why I'm asking the question is, I recall I made a call to an influencer because I wanted them to be part of this show. And I remember it was the first episode and they told me to speak to their agent. So, and I told myself, oh, great, very professional, but then when I started engaging with the agent, we spoke once and the agent was supposed to get back to me and they didn't even bother to actually just call me back. So Kamarichi, what are your views on that?
Well, from where I'm seated, I commend the influencer for having representation first, because that's, it begins the professionalism in now their craft. And I believe management is very important, because a good team would help you establish your brand, your value, and also navigate the contentious issues around the race card. Management also helps advise and facilitate the relationships that build your brand and your audience. So, it's the kind of thing that gets your brand to be bankable. And then, there's a question of fair value as well. How much do you get as an influencer out of all the engagements you get? Mm-hmm. And, as your brand becomes bankable, people start venturing into franchising and merchandising, something we've seen going all over the globe. So, we've seen Sauti Sol do this with Soul Records. We've seen Jalango do it with Jalango TV. And, but the kind of scenario I want you guys to picture and actually look at is the very real possibility of something like a Njugush tariff on Safaricom. Someone like Joy Kendi can do a swimwear in partnership with Rivertex. So you see, that's where management comes in. It's about turning the influencer hustle into a business. And I think over time I've come to see, and other influencers would also tell you, that good representation has actually helped them grow their brands, grow their audiences. And but touch on the last point you said, I think it's also very important for influencers to pick the right representation, so you don't end up with the situation like you had where the manager didn't really get back to you.
All right, thank you for this. I had a chat about this with Sarah Oyungu before this. Sarah, would you like to tell us what you think about this?
So I say it's a fine line. Across my career, I've worked with agencies who've come in on behalf of influencers, and they come in so high that as a brand, we shut them down before they've even gone. So the influencer has no idea that they've lost business because their agency is focused on the markup. I'm going to pay my influencer X amount and here's my markup, you know. And then there's also the scenario where the agency is coming to me saying, here's how much we're charging for your influencer. Then the influencer sidebars me and says, Ati, they asked for an M. I can do this for 200K. You know, and so, you know, there's some whole dynamics in that. The value of the agency, I guess, to the brand is that there's some responsibility of who the back end stops with. I know who I can follow to get things done. But I think the most effective influencers are the ones who have a direct relationship, whether they have an agency representation or not, with the brand. So they feel the heartbeat of the brand. They know what the brand wants. They're able to interpret it and understand it with or without their agency. And then I'd say the last benefit of the agency to the influencer, and I guess we all feel this in our career lives, is it's good to have somebody who can tete us, who can go and have those hard conversations about cost and so on and so forth. But I think in order for agencies to be effective for the influencer also needs to be aware of what brands are paying other influencers and ensure that their agency is not shooting them in the foot by coming and posting either and promising either impossible things or proposing either huge costs. It's a very fine line. So for the most part, yeah, it's a very fine line. Let me leave it at that.
I mean, thank you for this. For what you said, I would like to bring in Moses, you know, so I don't know if you've had this, I mean, any of these, any experience coming to that, but I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people have hired you to do, you know, a certain number of things, you know, online, talk about the brands, you know, and so on. So have you ever considered being represented? Do you think it's something that would work for you? Or do you think for the kind of engagements that you have, you'd rather do it, you know, yourself?
Thank you very much, Chris, for the question. In my experience, I think both approaches have worked. I think when you go through an agency as an influencer, what I like is that the agency typically will take care of things like your payment. They'll also help with some of the negotiation. Of course, they're going to mark up the fees. And sometimes they give you visibility that the client may not even be aware of, in the sense that what happens when a brand is not even aware you exist, but the agency is able to then convey your reach, your platforms, your historical performance, and position you in the right way in front of that customer. So for me, I think that's one of the perks, or the benefits that an agency brings to the table, that they can kind of elevate and sort of surface the opportunity that you represent for their brand. On the other hand, sometimes there's a risk that you can end up being sort of pigeonholed into doing specific things, and you sort of lose that quality of content or that sort of authentic voice that you normally have, because you're then maybe tweaking or packaging yourself in a certain way that maybe the agency may have sold you to the client. And I think that's why I agree with Sarah that I think it's really important that the influencer has a direct relationship to some extent, even if the commercial engagement is not direct. But at the end of the day, they need to sort of be at the core or very close to the heart of what that brand is about, so that they can effectively tell the brand story in a way that they can able to then connect to their audiences in a way that the audience is already accustomed to. They can create content that is going to resonate because they really understood the root and the cause of what the brand stands for. And therefore, then they're able to essentially conduct a very effective influencer campaign. But ultimately, yes, I think both ways can work. But I think the influencer does need to make sure that they're as much as possible aligned to what the brand wants and needs. And then that allows them to have the creative flexibility or license to do what is going to be most effective for them.
Oh, thanks for this. Now, Kamarichi would like to say something about this, but before we go back to Kamarichi, I want to talk to Nelson, because Moses mentioned something just now. Moses just said that, you know, an influencer agency could really make a brand aware of you. You know, they've never heard of you, but, you know, simply because they represent a couple of guys, you know, they will put your profile forward. But isn't this now then what the platform that you have, Nelson, what the platform can do? So what role does it play? Does it remove the middleman from the equation, or what really, what's the scenario here? So is there really a role for an influencer agency if we have you This is basically what I mean.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so I think there's a fine line. In some sense, to some level, we might remove the middleman because, I mean, and we'll demonstrate later how the power of our platform, but what we are developing now, we are developing internal tools which will give, multinationals so that they can run their influencer marketing campaigns internally with their teams. And of course, there are some companies who would want to still have the agency model, which will still provide. But coming back to that question, I think there's a really fine line, and I agree to some extent with what what Sarah said about sometimes agencies coming forward and really overselling their influencers, and also on the other hand, what Amarichi said, that it's good to have an agency so that this influencers are managed from one point of one channel, and the back stops at the talent agencies. But what I'd like to say is that there's two ways to look at it. There's creators and there's influencers. And I'll still go back to my point that influence is not a profession, right? It's an outcome. So it would be foolhardy to have an agency looking after influencers. But on the other hand, creators, that's an occupation. That's a skill they have that no one else has, that they stand out in. And that would actually what would need representation, because you need to be able to amplify, an agency has the reach in terms of, clients who would want to use this particular service. The particular creator would not have access to or visibility to that. So that's why an agency model would work. But when it comes to influencers, I think this is an area where, because influencer marketing is about driving conversations. It's because marketers have realized people don't want to be told what they want to hear. They actually want to be part of the conversations. How do you drive conversations? Is by looking for people, like what Sarah said, have the interest of your brand at heart. They love your brand, and they actually talk about it without any prior, without being prompted to do so. So we call these guys key opinion customers. So you'll go to Twitter and find someone saying, hey, my Stanchion account got 1,000 shillings today just because of me being a member for the past 5 years, and it's my birthday and they recognize me. So that's a key opinion customer, and our platform is able to identify these people. It's able to identify the key opinion customers who really love the brand, they have the best interests at heart, and they're able to just converse about it freely, and their audience knows them and relates to them talking about this in the past, so it doesn't look like an advert. So it's really like just flows as a conversation, and that's very relatable, that's believable, and it's credible. So I think that's my 2 cents to it in those two perspectives.
All right, thank you very much for this. I would like to talk to Kamarichi, because he said he feels like he would like to add something to, after what Sarah said, he feels that he would like to add something to it. So here you go, Kamarichi.
You're mute.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was saying, I'd like to agree with what Sarah had said to begin. And I'd like to also touch on the part where the management agencies come in as well. So the role that we would play also is there has to be that transparency between an influencer or a content creator in this aspect and the agency. That way we don't have the issue that Sarah has mentioned, where the influencer will meet the account manager at brand level and find out that agency quoted 1 million shillings as they would have charged 200,000 for it. But there's also the question of fair value. Who's actually assessing the value of this influencer? Standard Chartered would be charging a ledger fees of about 1,000 shillings. That's because you're getting unparalleled service everywhere, and they can very easily justify that through all their costings. Safaricom also would unapologetically charge you 99 shillings for a GB of data for 24 hours, because
We have no
not,
expiry these days. No expiry, no expiry.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the correction. So, but it's because
I'm just kidding.
oh, okay, that's your 10 minutes of customer experience will come in after this, yeah. So I mean, it's the service you get from it, and so the influencers also know what they've done, how they've built their audiences, how they've cultivated them, and so now they're inviting their audience to partake in your product. So I mean, the fair value is one thing that needs to be considered, and there's places where I think actually earlier this year I've negotiated for an influencer to get about 2,000 per Instagram post. And that's because the client can see the immediate value they're gaining from this post. To take that one post for them to deliver value. So it's always about fair value, what you're bringing to the table as an influencer. And the management actually comes in to help you understand that, because if you undervalue your brand, then you're presenting the opportunity to the agencies and to your clients to just exploit you and, pay you 20,000 shillings instead of the 200,000 shillings that actually go around this. And when you look at the math, living as a Kenyan, how long you've taken to build this and what you're really trying to get out of it, and you look back at fair value, then you find the influencers are really looking to charge for the $2,000 as opposed to the 20K.
All right, great stuff. I would like to, because you mentioned Safaricom, I kind of wanted to talk to Carl Kendi, but Sarah feels, there seems to be a very interesting conversation between Sarah and you. So, Sarah, before we go to Kendi, would you want to add something?
I say you're only worth what a person is willing to pay for you. So you can talk about fair value all you want. And to give an example, you can go to your boss and say, look, I'm the person who works 14 hours a day. This is my output. This is whatever. But what your boss values you for is what you're going to get paid. And so while it's frustrating to influencers, it's frustrating to artists, it's frustrating to entrepreneurs, it's frustrating to tailors, chefs, unless the other person places that commensurate value in you, then there's no way you're getting what you call fair value. And it's a hard but true fact. The other thing, sorry, I don't have corona. The other thing is the budget that the client has is the budget that the client has. And they're going to go with who they can afford. So if I'm doing production and you give me Spielberg prices, which for Spielberg is fair value, and you give me Kamau Mwangi prices, and he can give me something interesting that is, maybe it's not Spielberg, but it'll get the job done, then that's what I'm going to go with. Those are the hard realities of negotiating. And this is why I say, no offense from an agency perspective, is that I find in a lot of cases, agencies especially come with a one engagement mindset. Either they're trying to push a 2-year commitment, or they say, well, for this one engagement, I'll give you X amount, that's fair value. And if you engage with me for 2 years and guarantee me X amount, I'll give you this amount. And in both cases, you shoot yourself in the foot. Whereas sometimes when I deal directly with influencers, they're like, okay, I have a view to the long term. I know you're not promising me work. Let me know what your budget is. I'll let you know what I can actually do. It doesn't mean that they're cheapening themselves. They're just setting them up for a longer run and for what the client is actually able to deliver. And there are times where the brand will come back and say, this is what I can give. And the influencer will say, was nice meeting you. If another time comes in the future, let's work together. Mm-hmm. Other times the influencer will say, you know what, let's try, let's do this once, but I'd like to have some sort of guarantee or from you or promise from you that for future business you will consider me for these type of engagements. All right.
Joy Kendi, we haven't actually asked you if you would consider, do you currently have an agency, or would you consider working with an agency to represent you? What do you think?
Generally, I do not have an agency. I just do everything myself. But I do have a specific agency that I work with for very specific jobs, if that makes sense. So there's certain jobs where the client is asking for, you know, a year-long contract plus owning the rights plus face of plus like there's a lot of add-ons. And for those kinds of things, I like to use management because they can negotiate better. They can basically find a way to get me what it is that I want, and also still like they can get me the job and basically have me be paid well for what it is that the client wants. But generally on a day-to-day, I do not have any management. And those are mainly for jobs that I got for myself long before even management was even considered. So a lot of the jobs I've just done myself.
All right. I recall. I'm sorry?
And I'm saying like it's very possible because also a lot of people have that mentality of if you don't have management, that's the reason why they're not getting jobs. So it is very possible. You just need to learn how to look at this business as a business versus I just like to create content. So I look at it first business, then create content creation after.
All right. I recall, thank you very much, Joy. I recall representing someone, but it was more of brand management, you know, and discussing actually with, I mean, they were given a job by Safaricom, actually, since you have Safaricom here. And, you know, and basically they had quoted, Safaricom just gave them an offer and they said yes. And then they came back to me because I was managing the brand actually. And I told them absolutely not. So I picked up the phone and I called Safaricom and we've negotiated and they've agreed to actually just pay a bit more, you know. So sometimes it works. And on this note, I'd like to hear what Madame Safaricom, Kendi, what do you have to say on the agency? Because during the last session, you also mentioned that sometimes it's better for you guys to work with agencies because they have some sort of float, so you don't have to worry about payments and stuff like that. You know, frustrating influencers. So so would you like to talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so I think for me, the approach is always practically from what are we trying to achieve, right? As a brand, because again, it's a business. It's a business for the brand. It's a business for the influencer. There's an objective we're trying to achieve. Yeah. So I think first is we start from, okay, so what are we trying to do, right? And if, you know, a practical business would be a P&L to say, okay, so I want to sell whatever, which will be 1,000 shillings. If the cost, therefore, now depending on what I'm trying to achieve, there's two approaches. I can either go directly to the influencer or go through a middleman, yeah, would be your agency. For me, it depends on what we're trying to do and what everyone is trying to achieve, number one. Then two is what is the value that the agency and the middleman is adding to both parties, because this is a partnership of value add across. So either the agency will add value to the agency will add value to the brand by either connecting them to the influencer, you know, being the middleman with regards to, you know, the practical things, whether it's about money or payment, but also even bringing the brand, getting the influencer to understand what the brand objectives are. And then for the influencer, their job is what the agency does is do things like you just mentioned, to negotiate on their behalf, to be their person. You know, I see influencers, and I think it's content creators, as creatives. And most of the time, you know, creatives are not necessarily the best business people, and you don't have to be. That's not your strength. So it's about how you're partnering with someone. As long as you understand what your strengths are and what your proposition is, and I'm speaking influencer as the brand, then now that the agency or partner is your business partner who helps now do the business part. So you concentrate on being the content creator, doing the fun stuff. So I think people like Joy, Kendi are unique in the sense that you're able to do both, and that's great. But the fact that if you're not, then I would say, you know, that's why you get also somebody to do the business and to negotiate and do that stuff, so that you can focus on just being the content, creating the content and driving the authenticity of what your brand stands for. So I think for me, it's not a one size fits all. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. And ultimately, depending on now that, it will influence whether you do directly, whether you go with a model, what your strengths are. You know, it's one of those things that you just have to evaluate as you go along.
All right. Thank you very much for this. Well, I would like to talk about something a little bit more serious now. You know, something that people might really feel offended with, but I mean, it's something real. It's something that we really have to talk about. And we've seen this happening all over the world, you know? So you hire an influencer, they start running on a campaign, and then they get involved in something, you know, some drama. Some brands decide to actually just really end the engagement there and then, you know? So some brands decide to, I mean, here in Kenya, for example, some brands act like they don't know what's going on, you know, they don't see what's happening. So and this is really, to me, this is actually quite a big thing, you know. So so what do you guys think? Do you think influencers should be held accountable for the options? We touched a little bit on that last week, but I think since we're talking about money management and all, where they need to be coached and told what to do as well sometimes, what do you guys really think? Do you think we should even go to a point where influencers are even maybe blacklisted? You know, I know I'm pushing it a little bit too far, but what are your thoughts on that? Moses, I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about that before we go and talk to the other panelists.
So I suppose that's one of the caveats of working with influencers, right? Is these aspects of the fact that they're an individual, they have their passions, they have their interests, they have potentially controversial positions on certain things, and you want to make sure that when you're engaging with them, you know, these are risk areas, these are things that could go sideways. So how do you deal with it? I think if you're going to do an engagement with them, definitely there could be some form of code of conduct, perhaps, because again, if you think about, let's say, a brand like Safaricom or Standard Chartered, they subscribe to certain values as a brand. And even as they engage influencers, there needs to be a good fit so that there's a sense of, okay, these are guys, we look at their track record, you see how they're engaging. We generally feel they're going to be a good fit. We don't expect any controversy. But I mean, even in other mainstream marketing activities where somebody becomes a brand ambassador, you can remember probably the time when Nike was sponsoring Tiger Woods and he had some scandalous things happen. They kind of held back on his engagement, but also they came back stronger as a partner, showing that they were really aligned between the two brands. But I think it's critical to remember that, you know, that is always going to be a risk area. And I think it's really important to kind of understand whether the influencer is risky, just looking at their past performance, and understand whether your brand will be at risk from that perspective. But also, I think there's opportunities where a brand should also recognize that that risk does exist, and sometimes an influencer might not always be sitting on the right side of political or, you know, opinions around certain issues. And that maybe sometimes, depending on the nature of the controversy, could be forgivable. But also, again, yeah, I think with the research and, you know, maybe using platforms like Nelson's, you know, being able to sort of measure sentiment and understand, you know, outside the brand engagement, how does this influencer generally engage, and are they really aligned or fitting well with what our brand is all about? So I think some homework or some pre-engagement analysis or due diligence is necessary to make sure that, you know, you're not putting your brand at risk from that perspective.
All right, thank you for this, Moses. Kamarichi, you manage a lot of influencers. So what do you have to say about that? Do you think they should be held accountable? And then what process do you have in place? I mean, how do you manage that when something like that happens and it's one of your clients' brands, you know, that is at stake?
Yeah. Well, just to touch on the integrity bit, I think integrity and ethics are actually the holy grail when it comes to your reputation as a content creator or an influencer. And in this line of business, it's basically everything. So, you know, we've always advocated for the practice of, you know, integrity and ethics in everything that we do, you know, to the extent where we've had quarterly retreats where we invite industry experts to come and talk to the influencers just to see how they can go around these things and actually, you know, become part of the emerging value chains and capitalize on that. Should influencers be held accountable? Definitely, because, you know, they come in as, you know, an individual. So the agency is there to manage them and represent them. Where we've come in is also set out specific strategies, and, you know, all our agreements and contracts with them actually bind them. And in that, they're supposed to act a certain way and behave a certain way, because they're now not just, you know, they can't be a Twitter keyboard warrior. They have to watch what they say. There's a way, there's certain way they have to carry themselves. You know, to touch on what Moses said, there's the values that these brands have. So, you know, even when the influencers were being picked, I think even with Nelson's platform, you can match the right influencer to the kind of brand they want to work with. So when this is determined, a lot of trust has been put to an influencer, to be a part of a campaign. So it's the professional responsibility for them to actually perform as expected. We have the integrity, have the ethics, and I think management also comes in to make sure that that's aligned. And when there's a situation with a client, then I think it's both on the agency and on the influencer as well. What exact situation was the influencer involved in, and how is the agency actually working around this to actually, come out, get a good story to come out of it. So it's both of them, and I think both should be held accountable.
Right. I'd like to talk to Joy about this. Joy, you were hired for a campaign, and something happens. Life happens, right? So, so do you think it's fair if, you know what I mean, the brand just tells you, listen, we're very sorry, but we're going to just have to end this. So what do you think? Let's talk about accountability and integrity. So what are your thoughts?
I think from a business perspective, it's fair. I mean, the client or the company, they have their right to not want to be affiliated with you anymore, if that's the case. My biggest thing is I'm not a fan of blacklisting, just unless, it depends on what the offense is. There's a lot of stuff that's very forgivable. So I'm not a fan of blacklisting, but I do think that people do need to be held accountable, because you do need to realize that once you become a content creator and you are representing brands, you're no longer yourself. If you just can't say or do whatever you want to do, or whatever you used to do, you kind of still need to be very responsible. So usually for me, my rule is just to avoid such stuff. A lot of things that usually tend to ruin your reputation are always very private things. So I'm just a firm believer in just, keep your private life your business, and nobody cares about it if you never talk about it. So usually my content, I try to focus everything just on me. I never show my relationships, family, things like that. And it's worked out so far.
All right. Thank you for this. Madam Safaricom, Kendi, would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, I think for me, at the risk of being a little bit controversial, I think for me, this brands stand for what people believe in, right? And the flexibility of what an influencer does and represents is dependent on who their target audience is and who they're trying to connect with. So, I mean, integrity and ethics are extremely important, but it doesn't mean you have to be boring and stuck up. I mean, there are brands like, a bank or like Safaricom is a family brand, so there's definitely values and a way that brand express. But it doesn't mean that you as an influencer, if you have a playful character, for you authentically is a bit risque or a bit out there. I think it's about how do you align yourself to brands. Like a good example is Virgin. Virgin as a brand is playful, it's a bit out there. Richard Branson is a bit crazy. So those are the things. I mean, I just think that there's a risk of sending a message that because we are talking about ethics and integrity, then everybody has to be kind of fit in this mold, which is not the case. I think it's about really understanding what the brand stands for, and then and brand here is you as a brand, as an influencer, but also who your target brand is, whether it's Safaricom or whoever, and then seeing if there's a fit. And there are some brands, if there's a brand where you actually say, actually because of what my brand stands for as an influencer, I don't want to do work with Safaricom because those guys are gonna kill my vibe, and that's okay. So I think that balance is there, and it's important to because I think for me in this space of content creation, the magic is in the authenticity, and that's what you need to keep true. You need to be true to who you are because that's what people will connect to. So I think the Nike example is a good one where ultimately, if your brand stands for resilience or being human, then that's a really good justification to say even after Tiger Woods went through what he went through. As a brand, we stand by him, and because we're human, and those are the kind of things that drive affinity for the brand. So I think I just wanted to bring that perspective of it can be a bit. It doesn't have to be all boring. I mean, that's human beings are not together. We're crazy. So it's about connecting with that.
I like that. They will kill my vibe. Okay, well, yes, you said that. The other brand, Sarah Yungu, I believe you have something you would like to say about this. So what are your...
I do. This is a fun one. This is a passion point for me. Just because a lot of brands go with, we want to do something big, we want to cut through, so we're just going to go and get an influencer. And what Moses said actually resonated, which says you have the risk-benefit analysis, where if you're going for this big pop star or sports personality who's going to give you immediate cut through, but the next day is going to like punch a prostitute in the street, then you have to ask yourself, was the benefit of having the cut through worth it for kind of the raised level of awareness that we've had? That's number one. Number two, going back to something that Joy said, is remember that every influencer or content creator is a business. It's actually a business. So like any other business, if I was getting a caterer, if I was getting an event planner, if I was getting whoever, there's a contract. And in that contract, you have to be careful to actually spell out the clauses for termination of contract, where you say if this and this, if you are accused of a felony, if you're accused of, or if you are convicted, because that's another angle, you can be accused and then found innocent. But if you're convicted of whatever, or if there's any legal whatever, you give us room to step back and you give us back our money. So having that contract in place is definitely key. And the reason why brands are using influencers is you can say things in the way that we can't. If a bank or whatever started going, yo, we're so cool, we're so whatever, the public is not stupid. They'll be like, that's not your voice. So that's why I go out for an influencer. That's why I go out for a content creator, so that I can use their authentic voice. So back to, I think what Moses was saying was, you need to go back and you need to do your due diligence. That authentic voice, are you willing to have it talk about you, and then you make the decision. But I think there's so much around this space.
All right,
that
thank you so much. Mr. Nelson Aseka, you keep on saying that influencing is not a job, it's not a career, so you keep on saying that, but so what are your thoughts on this? If it's not a career, then should I be really held accountable, if I'm just really influencing, and I happen to do something that happens to affect the brand? Should I be blacklisted? Should they not work with me? What do you think? Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I wasn't right here. Right, so I think for me, and even our brand, we have three key things that we look at when you're getting influencers. Number one is affinity to the brand. Number two, emotional connection to their audiences. And number three, which is really, really like a highlight, is brand security, because you don't want to at any point put the brand you're representing in jeopardy because of an influencer's past or character. So we do a really deep insight kind of, it's called a psychographic analysis, behavioral analysis, and sentiment analysis of the influencer, where we map over 200 data points, which look at what we call the ocean model in terms of personality traits. So it's openness to experience, it's the conscientiousness of the influencer, what's his extraversion like, what's his agreeableness, and what's the neuroticism. Yeah. So being able to do that, we are able to tell someone's nature, we're able to tell what he's prone to do, and we're able to tell what makes him tick, what kind of triggers can make him do something. So we are able to accurately see and accurately tell that if you use this guy in this particular campaign and something happens in which is anticipated, or what that kind of thing, this is how he'll react. Or we're able to tell this guy by just studying his past posts and just being able to gain deeper insights in him or her has had a scandalous past. This is how he approaches the subjects. This is his subjectivity and things like that. So I think that's very important when it comes to influencer marketing and campaigns and just ensuring brand security. Because on the other hand is, people are very discerning now. Customers are really discerning and they really follow to see what people are talking about. And especially when it's a big influencer, the macro, the nanos, the Kenyans first, not Kenyan only, but Africa, as in the first thing they want to do when they see a public figure is hate. That's natural. It's the Africans kind of, DNA. So you first hate, then you start aging to love the person, and that's why when something trivial happens with an influencer, you get people really reacting in a really big way. So we have to really conduct brand security before we run influencer campaigns with our influencers.
Did you really have to go there, Nelson? Really? I mean, this is how we are.
It is real. It's real. That's how it is.
I cannot believe this. All right, guys. I don't know if anyone else would like to add something because we're just about to move to a whole different category, something that even my own clients are actually dealing with right now. So, Joy Candy, you've worked with a lot of clients before. Brands have gotten, I don't know if it's a shortcut, but what brands do today is instead of paying, physical cash, to influencers, they send PR packages, really beautifully designed PR packages, and what happens really is, so influencers get them and they manage to get some value because influencers then create content on that. Of course, PR packages have some sort of monetary value, they're worth something. So the question really now is, and what we're seeing is that a lot of brands now are doing that and would prefer actually even send you a PR package rather than paying you, and a lot of people are asking those questions. Some influencers are not necessarily happy. Some think it's okay. So what do you guys think? Do you think this is a viable model, or considering that an influencer spends time, a content creator spends time, money to actually create that content as well? So is it a 50-50? Should they pay a little bit of money and then have a PR package? What do you think? I'd like to talk to the influencer first, so to Joy first, and we'd like to talk to the other ones afterwards. Are you muted?
Sorry.
Yeah.
For me, I personally don't have an issue with it. It's one of those things that you kind of have to decide what works for you. And you also have to communicate with the company or the client how you feel about it. So for example, if a company doesn't want to send me a PR package, I usually tell them it's cool, number one, but also kind of let them know whether or not, or the conditions to whether or not I'll post. So if, for example, you send me a makeup, whatever, I'll tell them, cool, but if I don't like it, I'm not going to post about it. So you should already know that beforehand before you even send it over. Also, sometimes that PR package is what is also going to get you jobs in the future. So some companies will use that to kind of just see what type of content the creator can actually create out of it. And I've done that before where somebody sends me something, I post about it, and it gets me multiple jobs. So you kind of have to decide what works best for you, but you also need to be clear with the person beforehand. A perfect example, I was sent a PR package by High Design, and they just sent me a bag. I love the bag, and I posted about it. And that post is what got me face of their brand. And I was the face of the brand for like a year. So it's small things like that can actually change your life. You never know.
Okay, Sarah Yungu, you have something you'd like to say about this?
Yeah, I totally resonate with what Joy is saying, because I've noticed from the brand side, you get more authentic comments and feedback if there's no expectation that, especially if you're sending it as a PR pack, not as a paid engagement, where I say, hey, content creator, who this actually makes sense to you and your followers and your fan base. Here's something, try it. If you like it, talk about it. You see, and then I think you get more value and authentic conversation around that than trying to squeeze an influencer or content creator's arm and say, I'm sending you this, but before you use this hamper, you need to promise me that you're going to talk about it. You know, of course, they'll tell you, Kwenda Kabisa, can you pay my rate? Here's my rate card if you want me to talk about it. And the other thing that I really do want to raise for brands is reciprocity. There's value that we can add to content creators if we are giving them content that they can then create. And one of this is around events. Like there's certain events that I'll do where I'll invite bloggers and so on, because the topic is relevant to what their followers or what their base is. So I'm actually giving them something that they can then use. So there's that reciprocity, which is, it's not required. It is, come and see if this makes sense for your people, go ahead and do it. And brands, before you send PR packs, make sure it's relevant to the influencer and what it is that they're doing. Don't just shoot it out blindly.
Yeah. You're on mute.
Chris, you're
Looks like I'm on mute. All right. So thank you very much for this. Mr. Kamarichi, what do you have to say about this? You've probably have to deal with this quite often, you know, so the people that you manage. So thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there's what Joyce mentioned, which is quite true. You know, it's I think it was part of last week's discussion as well. So when it's getting your foot in the door for an influencer, I would recommend that you do it, work with it. You know, if a big international brand has sent you a PR pack, then, you know, that's different. That's a game changer. And, you know, I'd also like to agree with what Sarah mentioned for the latter part. But then we come down to, let's look at our country now, you know, our economy. There's the part where a lot of PR packages have been sent, and, you know, the influencers really looking at it, and their response is, it's nice to be a part of it, but I can't give this to my landlord. KPLC won't take this, you know. So what we found as a best practice is the packages, they work. The influencer actually needs a package to actually create the content. I mean, if they're going to sell you a bottle of water, they need to actually tell their audience, you know, this water is, you know, it got a better bottle than the others, and that kind of thing. They need to create the content around it. So they would actually need the pack. And above that, there needs to be a consideration for the endorsement. So, I mean, I think there's two sides to the coin. If it's going to benefit you as an influencer, by all means take it. But, you know, again, on the brand and agency side, they also need to, you know, realistically look at who the influencer is as a person and consider that, you know, they live in the same country that we do, and, you know, they've got the day-to-day bills that they always have to make good on.
All right. Thanks for this. Mr. Kemibaru, any thoughts on this? PR packages, you know, is it a cheap way of using influencers, or is it, or what do you think? Good idea?
I think PR packages become the gateway to a longer term engagement. And I think from my own experiences, you know, over the last decade or so, you know, even in the days predating, you know, the title influencers, you know, we had this sort of scenario where, you know, you'd get phones and other gadgets, let's say, from the tech providers and so forth. I can tell you for free that the brands that, you know, kind of analyzed what you're doing and sent you stuff that was relevant to the kind of content you create, you always appreciate it. And in fact, what would tend to happen is you're always almost overwhelmed because, you know, initially those days it was more like a hobby. It wasn't something that you thought of as a career or as a full-time main business kind of thing that you would do. It was a gateway. And then what you'd find is, in my experience, that the PR pack, I think, also gives the brand an opportunity to gauge what the influencer is able to do. It gives them an opportunity to also see, you know, their creativity. And of course, if they're really impressed with the outcomes and the fact that you take the initiative and you turn it into much, much more, then it can end up becoming really a long-term and highly commercial engagement. The only caveat to that is that sometimes there's this expectation that brands tend to have that it's very transactive, meaning that, okay, I gave you stuff, I want you to do something. All right. Maybe the guy just takes it and doesn't do anything. It doesn't, come up with any value proposition for your brand. On the other hand, I think it also is a call to action to brands to not just treat the influencer engagement as a transactive one, but really a relationship building opportunity. I mean, I know for a fact that, for instance, when an influencer is invited to a forum or a drink up after work because they're recognized or appreciated by their brand, it goes a long, long way to get them on your side, irrespective of whether or not you're going to have a commercial engagement. But long and short of it, I think it becomes a gateway, it becomes a way of maintaining a relationship and even starting one. But most importantly is that I think the influencer needs to have that buy-in or that sense of relevance to the product or service being given as a PR pack, so that they can then start to taste it and eventually convert and become advocates for that brand.
All right, thanks for this. Before I go to Caroline Kendi, there's something that I would like to tell our audience. So please stick around, because what we're going to do at the end, towards the end, in a few minutes basically, is to allow Nelson to show us really, what a real influencer profile really looks like. So through his piece of software, he's allowed to actually pull some information. So it gives you a 360 view of what an influencer profile looks like. Really exciting stuff. So stick around. And I'd like to go now to Caroline Kendi. So PR packages, Safaricom, I don't know what kind of PR packages you would send. Would you send airtime? Would you get? I mean, what do you think of the practice?
We send data bundle. No, so I really agree with what Moses just said. It's about a relationship and a long-term business relationship. And if you look at it like that, when we're buying media, you have what we call paid media, which is what I pay, and then there's also earned media, right, which is now where PR fits in. So when I think for me the view that has been shared is you have to look at it as an influencer to say this is an opportunity for you to market yourself. So if your target audience is Safaricom, for example, and we do for you a PR package, then that's an opportunity for you to package yourself, to create, to demonstrate first your understanding of the brand and your what you do and what you stand for, and then based on that, you will eventually migrate the relationship into into the paid space. Yeah, because it's like an opportunity, to sample your product to the brand or whoever you're targeting. So I think for me, it's a great opportunity for influencers to open themselves up to a world that doesn't exist. And then also when you are in the relationship, or if we're already doing something, again, it's a great value add type proposition, because at the end of the day, if we're doing paid work on something else like data, and then you do value add a PR post, or just activate based on your authenticity on something like home, overall I'll be like, this is a business partner that is really giving me value, and the likelihood that I will work with you again and again is higher. So I think that's, for me, the way I would look at it.
All right, Sarah, did you share your views on this already?
I did. I just want to say I concur with everything that everyone has said.
All right. Mr. Nelson, would you like to add something to this?
Yes, sure. And so that's a very interesting question, because one of the power of our platforms is to be able to analyze and see through psychographic analysis to see what incentivizes an influencer most, right? So for instance, in the past, we've been able to see, for example, an influencer has been talking about going to Mombasa. I really want some flight to Mombasa and stuff like that. And we get a ticket for him, which is cheaper for the client than giving, money, because, that's part of their marketing, marketing budget and stuff. So in that case, the care package is better. And even in a recent case, we are currently running COVID-19 campaigns in Kenya. So we are dealing with over 1,000 influencers. And when we're analyzing and finding people who would love to just spread awareness around COVID and help curb its spread, we saw that the platform was able to pick and see that there's people who have the communities, their communities' interests at heart, and they really just want to spread it out. And just being part of the campaign for them was really, really exciting. And so they even joined and said, we don't even need to be paid for this. We just want to help spread the word. So it depends. It just depends on what incentivizes an influencer best. And we go with that, and just to ensure that we are getting the fairest of all kind of deals.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for this. So we're going to have one more question before Nelson basically goes and demonstrates more or less what platforms can do and how beautiful profiles can actually look and how much information you can really get from such a platform. So the question that I'd like to talk is actually that I'd like to ask is basically related to this. So it has something to do with influencer reports. As influencers and as brands, so you guys get involved into some campaign, then a report has to be written. So what goes into that report? What are and I believe that there's no standard report per se, but I would like to believe that there are certain things that should kind of always be present, in a report. So I would like to talk to Kamarichi for this, because I believe they have to write a couple of these, very often for brands, on behalf of the influencers that they manage. So Kamarichi, would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. So when you consider the source track marketing framework that was developed by PRC, which actually to date continues to serve as a global best practice, reporting would come in the control stage of a campaign. So ideally, the report should paint a picture of the impact achieved against the initial campaign objective. So what you want to report on is, you want to look at a recap of the campaign objective. You want to look at the content highlights. You want to measure the impact. This is typically the reach, the engagement, and the conversions. And then, there's the bit where you also want to look at the learnings and recommendations. So, we want to also see what worked, why didn't it work, and what can we do probably mid-campaign or for the rest of the campaign. But yeah, typically it's the recap of the objectives, the highlights, and the impact. Those are the main things that actually need to go into a report.
All right, thank you very much for this. Joy, you've had to write these reports. You've had to write many of these reports. So what typically goes into something like that? And for young influencers that are actually probably connected and that will probably watch this video, what do you have to tell them? What are the things that they should consider? You're muted again.
Okay, so when it comes to the report, it's usually sent in at the end of the engagement. Or if you have a long-term engagement, you send in a report every week or every 2 weeks, depending on how many posts that you've done. And in the report, different clients have different requirements. But most of the clients that I work with, they expect you need to break down everything. And the good thing is when you have things like Instagram, you can check your insights. So you can see everything from impressions, likes, how many people saw it, if it's a video, how many views. And in the Insta stories, you can even see how many people clicked on the link and things like that. So usually my report has a breakdown of everything, like every single thing, likes, comments, impressions, link clicks, video views. And also with that, because people can lie, a lot of clients have the requirement of you have to send screenshots of everything that you have done. So screenshots of the actual insights so that they can actually see if it makes sense with what you sent in as your report. So that's the really important thing about it. It's not worth it by hours because the report is going to show what it shows. So just have a genuine following and everything else should be easy.
All right, thanks for this. Sarah, as a brand, as a client, so what do you agree to this? Are there some things that you definitely expect to see? What would reports? What do you expect to see in a report from an influencer that you actually hire?
So I actually think the responsibility lies with the brand. I think the reason why influencer marketing has been given a bad rap is because brand marketing professionals do not tie the benefit of the influencer back to real business KPIs. So the business, the stakeholder I work with, if I tell them, oh, this got so many impressions, this got so many whoever, this got so many whoever, it just says that some work was done. It doesn't say whether it actually tracks back to the business goals. And so I think working backwards, one, the brand has to one, equip the influencer and say, this is what I'm driving. And then, is it that I want more take up of this product? Is it that I want more education? Is it that I want people to have an awareness of this? And then you have to get offline. I think, as Joy was stating, the influencer will tell you what they did. But for me, the report that matters is from an internal business perspective, what was the result? Did I see an uptake in call volumes, asking about the thing that the influencer was talking about? Did I see an uptake in social media on people asking about this particular thing? Did I see an uptake in people actually signing up for the particular, account or thing that people were talking about? Did I even strange things like, are we getting anecdotally when we're doing our studies, people saying, because we do that, we do callbacks to customers and so on. And then when I hear from somebody telling me, well, I was watching a video by Joy Kendi and she said, see, to me, that's success. Those are the reports that I'm looking for. So some of these other reports, I look at them, one, in advance when I'm choosing my influencer, to see the type of report that Nelson's talking about, to see who I'm going to choose and what value I can give them. Obviously, I'll use the influencer report to verify that the work was actually getting done so that I can have some stats to report to the business. But what really matters actually at the end of the day is the reporting that I do as a responsible brand and marketing professional on my side, so that I can prove to the business that this influencer is actually having an effect. That's what gets me marketing dollars.
Oh, thank you very much for this. I'm going to ask Nelson to grace us to actually really present. There's something really special that he's prepared for us. We've been talking about platforms. We've been talking about what these platforms can do, and so on. But you guys haven't really seen it. Some of you guys haven't really seen the kind of information that we can get out of it. So I would like Nelson to share what he has. I believe, Nelson, you can share your screen, and so we're going to try to do this in a short period of time because we've seen that there are some good questions coming through. There's one or two great questions that are coming through from the audience. So we'd like to also give them a voice and allow our panelists to answer. So, Nelson?
Okay. All right, please let me know once you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah, perfect.
All right, great. So our platform, what we've done is basically bring the power of AI to solve the biggest problem in influencer marketing. And what is the biggest problem of influencer marketing is ROI. Most brands that have been surveyed, brand teams, basically they've said that, yes, influencer marketing is a really powerful channel and media, but how do we are unable to tell the bottom line that we get out of this? And so the only way to do this is to use AI to, first of all, be very targeted on who you're actually projecting your brands to, who you're using to actually reach this target audience, what's the emotional connection, what's the brand affinity that the influencer has. And what I'm presenting today is just one, actually very, one of the smallest, actually not smallest, but it's one part of influence, what we do. As in, this is when we've identified a potential influencer, we go deep and see, is this person actually does he have an impact to the audience that the brand is looking for? And what kind of ROI or impact are we gonna get out of him or her? So first of all, I must say that we are signed up to we are a Facebook marketing partner, which is a very rare partnership to get globally. And you go through a really strenuous process of being validated and Facebook actually understanding what you do. But being a partner, we are able to get volumes of backend data about anyone in these platforms. But we sign to a very strict code of conduct so that we do not, breach data laws, data privacy laws. And what I'm presenting here is it's a profile about Bright Gameli, who I have expressly asked for permission for me to be able to share it here. So it's a real, Bright Gameli is at Bright Gameli on Instagram. And this is his profile, basically. So you can just to show you what our platform does. So this first page is a summary of the entire report. The entire report is 57 pages long. It's just 57 pages out of one single person's profile. So for instance, you can be able to see from the summary point, it shows that Bright Gameli's followers are in the late 20s with average income. The account has notable audience concentration in Nairobi. Academically, the audience contains high number of university graduates, and the most highly attended universities in this group is the University of Nairobi and Kenyatta University. And then typically, they're employed as software engineers. And for those who know Bright, he's in the software industry. I mean, he has a PhD in cybersecurity, actually. So it's very typical to find tech guys following him. So the next would be web designers, entrepreneurs, directors, TV and radio hosts. And the account ranks within the top 10% of Instagram accounts in density of communication specialists. It shows in their spare time, they love technology, news, photography, cars and driving, writing, dating and romance. And very interesting to note that people following Bright Gameli are charitably generous. So if you look on the right, you can see the kind of brands who would gain a lot of value in using Bright as an influencer. They include Kenya Airways, Airtel, Chase, and Snap2, Western Union. Those two are foreign. If you look on the left, there's basic statistics which shows you how many people follow Bright, how many are male, how many are married, how many are parents, their average income. You see where they are in terms of location. And then now we go to the nitty-gritties, as in this is still part of the summary. But going into the nitty-gritties, you're able now to see exactly who these people are. How many male are following him? How many female? How many are single? How many are married? We can see from this, the highest age group that follows Bright is between 25 and 29. We can go and see their income. So all this location by city, location by state, the universities they've gone to, which industries they work in, what occupations they are, personal income. Majority of them are under $10,000 per year, which means they earn less than 1 million shillings per year. There's then the second band, which is second highest, is between 1 million to say 2 million shillings per year, about 7,000 of them. And you find industries they work in, we're able to tell exactly what they work as, what occupations they are, and how many of them. Let me see something interesting. We know who their employers are, their likes, their interests, their sports, their music. And the most interesting part, which I would like to show you, would be brands, the brands that they actually love. This now his demographic. Let me go to the start of brands. Yeah, so the top brands, like you're saying, in Kenya would be like Kenya Airways, Samsung. I'm gonna try and look for banks and telco, just because of Kendi and Sarah. Oops, okay, banks is Chase Bank, or telcos, there is Safaricom. Banks, we have Chase. So people who follow Bright and love Safaricom are 1,118. The ones who like Chase Bank and Barclays would be, Chase would be 1,014. Barclays is 924. Yeah, so it's very, very intricate. We know who they are, where they are, what they like, what impact will it have on them. So this is just one of the reports. We have many others which show brand security. There are others which show emotional connection with the audience. Another one which show what affinities Bright actually has, and his psychographic analysis just to show his mindset, what he thinks about, what would incentivize him to do something and things like that. So this is just a really small part of the reports that our system is able to do. So I think I'm open to any questions from that. So you can see this is 56 pages worth of data on just one person. And our platform can produce this in less than 3 seconds. Yeah. So that's where the power of AI comes in.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for this. I have a lot of questions, for them. So, I mean, guys, you've looked at this. Do you believe that having a report like this or having such information empowers, say, an influencer to go and give them some sort of bargaining power when they go and meet a brand? Moses, I'd like to hear from you first.
Absolutely. I think for me, I'm a big fan of data-driven decisions. I don't think, things should always be based on sentiment or opinion. And I think if you're talking to a significant organization that is, considering working with you, and you have the benefit of data and also historical performance data from other campaigns, then it gives them really something to work with that gives clarity or transparency around, is this a good idea or not, right? I think in the digital age, you can't, simply go with your gut feeling anymore. You can't think or assume that you're good enough. I think if you have data to back up, who you are as an influencer, and also the brand then has more clarity around whether or not to work with you, not to mention that level of detail that we're seeing there, they will make a more informed decision, and even, quite honestly be able to tell you whether or not you're going to be a good fit for them. So I think this is the right approach. I think historically, influencer engagements were not highly data-driven as they are today. And I think Nelson's platform is one of the ways that you can maximize, or shall we say, limit the risk of the kind of engagements you're pursuing with different influencers. So I think it's an awesome and a very fantastic way to approach it.
All right. I'd like to hear from a brand. Because Sarah and Kendi, I mean, you guys, Nelson has done, this is his pitch, so you guys can actually see how powerful the platform is right now. Kendi, what do you think? Something that you guys would definitely consider using? You advise this for brands? You think it's a right way of doing things?
Definitely. I'm with Moses when it comes to data-driven decisions, because at the end of the day, we are leveraging technology to help us make better decisions about what we need to do to drive our businesses. So it's a win-win. I think it's great for the brand, it's great for the influencer, and it just removes the emotion from the conversation. And if you're not a good fit, it's a very simple reason why. If you're a great fit and you're delivering great results, you're also able to demonstrate it. So for me, it's definitely the way to go.
Thank you for this. I'd like to talk to Joy. Joy, you are the influencer, one of the influencers here. So what do you think? Do you think something like this could really help you? Let's say you had a profile like this, with a lot more data, a lot more information to share with your clients. So do you think this would empower you? What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on platforms even? She muted again? Yes.
Sorry.
Good behavior.
Yeah, I know. I agree with everybody in the aspect that it is 100% like what we're doing. It's a business, so you kind of need to make all your decisions using data. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of content creators or influencers in Kenya, like the biggest mistakes, is always going at it from a point but I believe that I'm worth 1 million shillings. Like, I believe I'm also worth 1 million shillings per Instagram post. But mathematically speaking, and with data, I am not worth that much. So I love it. I'm all about data because at the end of the day, it's a business, and clients could care less about how you feel that you're worth. At the end of the day, they want numbers. Like, why are you charging this much? And with this, it kind of just gives you more power when you're walking into an office and you want to negotiate a price, because now you actually have a breakdown as to why you are worth the amount of money that you are worth, or the amount of money that you're asking for. So I love it.
All right, thank you very much for this. Sarah?
Yeah, for me, this report is actually very, very, it's my exciting find for the day. So Nelson, I'll be calling. But one of the things that I'm noting, especially since March with the coronavirus, the landscape has changed. Okay, the opportunities during this time, there's a report that came out, I think it's called eMarketer, that showed that between the ages of 28 to 34, they had increased social media usage by as high as 51%. What does that mean? It means all of a sudden there's an opportunity for content creators and a wider audience that was there. And so I, as a brand, how do I, one, understand what that shift is, two, understand the platforms that are actually standing out. TikTok has been my new go-to during this time, and just understanding where those opportunities are. But then again, as had been previously mentioned, taking the emotion out of the decision, and also understanding the target audience that you're actually reaching. So examples, last year we had to get an influencer for more of a youth and up-and-coming segment. The names that we thought were not the names that that segment were actually even talking about. So having a report like this actually makes possible, not scary. I know someone in the comments has said scary. And it also doesn't contravene data privacy laws because the content of the users is anonymized. So if it had said, Sarah Yungu, phone number, follows X, whatever, because the social media platforms are going to be, and even the advertising platforms are going to be talking about anonymized data. They're not going to give you the actual users. That would contravene data privacy laws. But an aggregate, that's more than fine. And I don't need individual names at this point. I just need to get the big data dump. So I really like that this takes away the emotion. It certainly gives you actual facts. And then if I'm having a conversation with the business because I'm trying to get marketing dollars, then instead of me saying, I talked to so-and-so on the first floor who's 28 and so-and-so on the second floor who's 23, I can say, here's the data. These are the guys who they're following. So give me the money so that I can actually, engage them in some meaningful way. So I think this is very valuable.
All right. Thank you very much for this.
Chris, can I just make a quick comment because I need to leave. I have to log off shortly. But I think that issue on data privacy, I think, is a really important conversation to have. And just to echo what Sarah was saying, ultimately it's the insights. It's the story the data is telling you that it matters. Yeah. So it's not about the actual numbers in there, but when you look at everything, it usually brings something that now we can use for the marketing strategy. So I think important to ensure that yes, we are compliant to the law, and what brands are looking for is not the detail and on the people, but actually what is the story that the data says. With that, I really have to log off, but had a really great time and good luck.
Thank you very much, Kendi and Tatsun. Thank you very much for this. Before Nelson answers, because Nelson, you see, there are a couple of questions coming through, so we have to kind of address them. Kamarichi, I'd like to hear from you. You are an influencer marketing agency, so what do you make of this? Would you use a tool like this? Would it make your life easier? So where do you stand on this? I think you're muted.
Yeah, so we definitely use a tool like that because we can't afford to shoot in the dark. And what I've gathered from the report is it tells me who exactly the influencers' audiences are and what their interests, where the interests actually lie. So I can picture a scenario where, we're working with an influencer who's interested in fashion, food, and travel, but we get to see that their audience is really only interested in food. So then, as management, what we do is we double down on that audience and look at all the opportunities around that, maximize on that, further build the brand, on the culinary aspect. And then now when I'm actually approaching a brand in line with that, I can actually back it up and tell them, the reason you should actually work with this influencer is because they've further cultivated their audience here. And that actually makes them one of the most credible personalities you can actually work with to further your brand's agenda. And the data will actually come to show that there's a very high likelihood that the entire engagement will be successful. So,
all right, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate that. Mr. Moses Kemibaro, I believe you would like to share something. So,
yeah,
stage is yours.
I think yes, as a segue to what I mentioned earlier about the data-driven approach being, exactly what brands and agencies need to do. I think the other one is actually on the actual campaigns, so that at the end of a campaign or during a campaign, when Joy, for instance, is running a campaign or, we're looking at media running a campaign, I think one of the key things is nowadays the ability to measure the value that is actually being generated by the influencer during their campaign. And I remember a personal incident where we were running a campaign for a new beverage targeting women, and we had an influencer during the event launch. And she single-handedly on Twitter, using, again, data, you could actually see this dashboard showing almost like a web of connections. And she single-handedly was able to get, I think, over 800,000 people in Kenya to see something was going on around this brand and this beverage within a single evening. So it was kind of very profound in the sense that when you're running a digital campaign and you're working with influencers, do you have the ability to do sort of attribution and see, in real time whether this person is actually delivering value? Or post-campaign, are you able to do things like a trackable link where maybe the conversion is somebody clicking on an e-commerce platform, being able to see very clearly sales that can be attributed back to that influencer's engagement. And I think going forward, that's really one of the things that is becoming part and parcel of these campaigns, that you have a way of tracking and measuring the actual performance of that influencer in quantifiable terms and saying this person was, directly responsible for 3 million shillings in sales. So that's the kind of thing I think we'll be seeing going forward more and more in these campaigns.
Oh, thank you very much for this. We have a lot of questions coming in right now. We had a bit of a technical issue at the beginning, but it looks like our audience has really warmed up and, they're firing, so there are so many questions. So I think we're going to start, Nelson, these questions, a lot of the questions are actually really targeted at you, because it's really about the platform and all that. So the question that I would like to actually really tackle first is, 1 second, who exactly have access to the information? Yeah, this is a generic one, this is a generic one. Who exactly have access to the information? Can a brand directly get the information, or is it best to go through an agency and ask influencer proposals with this as supporting documents? I think I saw some similar questions here as well. So you guys could actually start thinking and say, whoever wants to actually take the question could actually just really, just really jump on this. So this is one of the questions that we have. The second questions that we had, based on what we've shared as well, Mwangari Steel. So based on the report that we've shown, is the data specific to Brian Gameli's IG engagement, or does it cut across all his platforms? Nelson, I don't know if you want to take that, because that's an important one as well, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, for 2 seconds.
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for having me. I'm gonna have to log off. But
thank you very much, George.
Bye.
Bye. So, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, so I'll take that. So this particular report was just specific to IG, but we can produce IG, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube reports. So I just produced this for IG just for today's presentation. So we can, to answer the question, so we can cut across all the platforms, but this specific one was an IG report.
All right, and while you're here, we have Joanne that actually just really asks, so is there a data-driven report that shows effectiveness of a campaign with an influencer? So what do you have to say about this one? Because I think someone said the report that you show is good pre-engagement. So what about this now? After when the campaign is running or after?
So one of the powers of platform is we are able even to predict the ROI that you'll get at the end of the engagement, even before we start engaging in that particular campaign. So there are metrics we look at through data-driven approach that are able to give us this data. And then to answer about bots, we also have part of our AI which actually determines whether the audience's profile is genuine. So we do an audience audit, and we can tell you how many fake bots or computer-generated metrics or fake followers are there, and we can even point you to where this particular fake audience was bought from. They're usually bought from like farms, so we know characteristics of bots from the different like farms, and we're able to pull that data in, and we'll be able to pinpoint what part of the audience is fake and where they're from. So we have very, very extensive reporting around this.
All right. I think there's another question that came through.
Before you move to the next question, if you could allow me, I'm sorry, I'm following the trend of the ladies falling out first. I have another engagement, so I have to drop off. But I did want to mention one following on what Moses was saying about the data and how it's so important. Caroline mentioned it as well, how important data-driven decision making is. But here's my caveat: data is data. Big data. There's a world of data out there, but if you don't have specific campaign KPIs that you put in place, this data is useless to you. If you're going to your stakeholders and say, look, they had 500, and I'd mentioned it earlier, impressions, and look how big they are on Instagram or on whatever. Before a campaign goes live, before an influencer is engaged, as a business person, you need to put together what are the outcomes you want from them. And it's only fair, whether you're working with an agency or the influencer directly. It's only fair, one, because it sets them up for success, to give you what it is you actually need to succeed. And two, it's only fair to your brand, so that you are actually meeting what your business, Caroline said it's a business. Caroline said it's a business. You actually, so then now when you're looking at the data, I'm looking at the data against what it is that I wanted to achieve. Nelson is saying they can predict ROI, but if I can't ask him, predict, for me, ROI will be, number of increased followers, or will ROI be number of increased accounts? Will ROI be number of increased users? Will ROI be number of increased questions or engagement with the brand? So that needs to be set up if you're going to be responsible with running campaigns with anything, whether it's with influencer marketing or paid media or anything. You really need to set that up front. Then the data makes sense. Otherwise, you're using data to look clever, but you're not giving value to your brand. So those are my last few words. Oh, and my last one.
Okay.
Influencer marketing gets a bad rap because brand leads don't know what they really want. So they can't really report success. So when they can't report success to their business, then everyone comes back and says, what? Influencer marketing doesn't work. That's not true. It's because you didn't set your KPIs properly and you didn't equip your influencers to deliver them. So I will go back to saying the responsibility lies with the brand to equip influencers to give them good results. Okay, that's my last word. And thanks, guys. It's been great hanging out with you today.
Thank you so much for your time, Sarah. We're just about to close, and goodbye, Sarah, as well. So there's this question that was asked, but I believe that Nelson actually kind of addressed it already. So they wanted to know actually percentage of real followers versus bots, because this is a really, really big question. You have these influencers that have 1 million followers or 500,000 followers, and people are asking themselves, okay, so what is real here and what's not real? All the formulas, that we're basing, costs on, rates on, then all of a sudden don't make sense anymore, if the numbers are not correct, right? So Nelson, I believe you've answered that question, right? So, and there was a last question, I think, have you tested the platform before? Yes, so Nelson, you can take this one and then we can actually then basically close.
Okay. Yes, we've tested it and quite widely. We are the first influencer marketing platform that is driven by artificial intelligence in Africa. We are currently working with almost 11 brands, major brands. There's a major telco, there's a major bank, there's a major, we are doing the COVID-19 response in all of Kenya, and we are going to do it in Uganda and Tanzania. So our platform works globally. We can work anywhere in the world without being physically present. And yes, it's been tried and tested with amazing results. And it's the results speak for themselves. Yes.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much to Wangari as well. We keep on getting questions from you. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily answer all of them because we started a bit late, while there were some technical issues. But what we can do basically is, if you really look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see Nelson's details. So his details are there. So you could actually, more than welcome to reach out to him. And I'm sure he'll be very happy to actually give you all the answers that you want. And we would like to thank all these panelists and the guys that decided to even stay here, because thank you very much for this, guys. Today's conversation was a really, really tough one, but I'm so pleased with the contributions that we received today. Real things that we need to talk about, real things. We don't run away from the questions that really matter, right? Next week, we are back with another show. And the show next week is titled, is called Influencers versus Brands. We won't tell you more about this now. Since you've all registered, now we're going to actually send an email with the details of next week's, session. Thank you very much to the audience for being patient and connecting despite the challenges that we've had in the beginning. Overall, we've had a very good show. I don't know if anyone wants to say something else from the panelists. Moses, anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you very much for having me over. I think today's conversation was incredibly engaging. Lots of good questions and insights, and I'm looking forward to doing this again if the opportunity.
Awesome. Looking forward to having you again. Mr. Kamarichi, what are your thoughts? Your last words?
Yeah, I think it's been a very good session. I think it's been very informative. Quite engaging. We've all picked up quite a bit from each other. I think as we go into our next week, we're taking a step in the right direction. So it's a really good one. Yeah, I think I'm also looking forward to the next one. Should the opportunity present itself. It's been a good one.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. And if there's anything that you'd like us to talk about, send an email to events, at digitalleadership.africa. If there's anything that you'd like to talk about and that we need to cover, because we're going to be live literally every Saturday, and we're really thrilled to have you. Till then, have a nice Saturday and a nice weekend, and catch you on the next one. Bye.